Yo, this is Clayton, and welcome to our first driver video update. I'll be making these videos for our drivers so you can get the same information I share with employees with email. Let's dive in. For today's topics, I have some staff announcements. I'm going to talk about the completion of our rural transfer, a recap of the 2026 legislative session here in Vermont, a look at federal funding levels in Washington, D.C., coming out of Washington, D.C., and the Town of Essex's departure from Green Mountain Transit. I want to start with an apology. As we go through life, sometimes we fail to meet our own expectations. There were times during our driver training in May where I became defensive, and I'm sorry for that. I was frustrated that some of the topics raised I had thought I had previously addressed. Even after 3 years on the job, I didn't understand the dynamics of how information flowed to you, and it was clear that much of my previous communication efforts didn't get to your level. Because you're out of the building most of the time you work, it's hard to communicate with you. I had already been talking to the stewards about ways to keep you updated, and that became a higher priority after the training. So I promised to do better, and here is one way we'll do that. For staff announcements, we have 2 departures and 1 arrival. Our grants director, Tim Bradshaw, will retire from GMT on Friday, June 10th. Tim has a long history with us, starting as a driver, with service in both rural and urban areas. We wish him and his family well as they transition to the retirement stage of their life. Next, John Moore, our Assistant General Manager, will depart GMT on July 24th. He will go to work with the Vermont Public Transportation Association, shortened to VPTA, which is the organization that manages Vermont's Medicaid contract for transportation. Over John's 18 years, he has served in just about every administrative capacity on our team, culminating with his leadership of GMT during the pandemic. And for an arrival, our new property manager, Demir, will be arriving on Monday, July 13th. We all know he has a long list of projects ahead of him, and we are eager for him to get to work. When the clock struck midnight the evening of June 30th, GMT stopped being a rural transit provider. For the past 2 decades, GMT was one of only a handful of organizations nationwide that maintain both urban and rural transit service. This is so unusual because urban and rural funding comes from separate federal pots of money, and the two can't be mixed. This means that our management team was essentially operating 2 independent companies with different financial rules, separate labor agreements, and an inability to share money between the two. One of the reasons I supported the rural transfer was employee feedback. When I arrived in 2023, we conducted an organizational assessment that surveyed and interviewed staff across our organization. The results were clear. We could not sustain both missions successfully. Many of the people interviewed felt that we were doing too many things poorly, and they wanted us to do fewer things well. At first, I hoped to use the organizational assessment to argue for more resources from the state, so that we would be able to retain both urban and rural missions, but with better funding and better management and support for our drivers. This approach was not supported by VTrans, so we instead took the approach of transferring the service. And that came to a conclusion on the night of June 30th. So why does this matter to you? This video is an example. I have more time to communicate with you because of this. Instead of attending to riders, legislators, and municipalities in 5 counties, I'll be doing it primarily in 1. Over the next year, you will see a much more responsive administrative team and much more of my attention, as we can now focus all of our time on supporting your service. For the Vermont Legislative Session, the biggest change is an update to our statute. So Green Mountain Transit is a municipality, and all municipalities in the state of Vermont are created by state statute, essentially Vermont state laws. This means that legislators and the governor control the charters, essentially, for these municipalities when they go through their legislative and executive processes. So the change in our statute gave us much more flexibility in generating local match. We have roughly a $20 million annual budget for our urban service. That's just for operating, not capital. And local match from our member municipalities is just over $4 million, or roughly 20% of our revenue. Previously, our statute limited our ability to raise funds to our municipal members through their assessments. This meant that any increase in funding for GMT, for local match, meant more pressure on the property tax. And if any of you own a home, you know property tax pressure and pain is real. With the change in law, we can accept funds for service from any public or private organization. This way, if a particular organization wants us to add service, we can ask that organization to pay for the change. One of the reasons why we brought Chris Cole back as a part-time employee is to help us operationalize this change. We're using his connections and experience to bring us to the table with folks that we hope will help contribute to our local match. Roughly 65% of our funding, about 2/3, comes from the federal government. And the federal government funds public transit through 5-year bills called surface transportation bills. These bills cover just about everything the Federal Transportation Administration does for over-the-ground transport, including public transit. So the current 5-year bill expires this September 30th. A replacement bill is not expected to be done this year. This means that there will be a continuing resolution to fund public transit another year while Congress continues to work on a new 5-year bill. Your stewards and I watched a presentation in May about concepts that are being considered in the new 5-year bill, and some of these concepts could be helpful for us, especially in terms of stick factors, where there is serious consideration for increasing the monetary award with these factors. And I'm going to have another episode talking about stick factors later, but all you need to know for now is that these are performance awards, and GMT is a very high-performing organization with the FTA with these awards, and so that could lead to more funding for us because of our good service, the good service that you help us provide. So the thing is that politics is always hard to predict, which means that we are both hopeful about items from the new surface transportation bill and also worried because it is such a significant portion of our funding. So one thing that will definitely spark debate amongst the drivers is that one consideration is requiring future bus orders purchased through federal funds include a driver barrier. This would apply only for vehicles 30 feet or larger. And the FDA has been very concerned about driver assaults the past few years. So I'm not surprised to see this in the bill or being considered for the bill. And I know that you all have differing opinions about whether the driver barrier is helpful or harmful. But it'll be interesting to see whether this makes it into the final version of the bill. Last month, the Town of Essex Select Board voted to depart Green Mountain Transit. This seems fair since we are planning to eliminate their only service, which is the number 4 loop that serves Essex and Essex Junction. In August, we will reduce this service to 50% and will eliminate the remaining service with the February-March 2027 driver bid. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that GMT is a municipality, and we're actually a municipality that's made up of other municipalities. So we have 8 municipal members right now, which is the City of Burlington, the City of South Burlington, the City of Winooski, and the City of Essex Junction. And then we also have Shelburne, we have Town of Essex, we have Milton, and we have Williston. And so that brings us to the 8. With the Town of Essex departure, we'll drop down to 7 members. And I can tell you that the Town of Essex's contribution to that $4 million local match is around $100,000. So you can see that Town of Essex is one of our smaller members. As mentioned, it's only the number 4 that has their service. And so even though we'll lose their contributions, there will be savings because we won't be providing that service. I can tell you that there is the potential for us to be using our new statutory authority to have the school, to have other organizations within the Town of Essex perhaps contribute to help retain the fund. And that at least was one of the reasons why we are delaying the overall elimination to February. The other reason why we are delaying the elimination is that there are about 78 folks that use ADA service because of that route. And this is the paratransit service that's required for people who have a disability that prevents them from using our fixed route service. Those folks are going to need transportation options, and it's not clear how that will impact other transportation systems like the Older and Disabled Persons Program. And so we need to study that more and to figure out how those folks will retain service after we end our fixed route. This brings us to the end of our first update. We'll be having these out every few weeks, just as I send out the updates to the other staff members. And in addition to recurring updates, I want to let you know that there's going to be 2 special videos on topics that I know are of interest to you because of the driver training feedback. And those are going to be on our fare revenue. And that's where we're going to dive into those stick factors, those performance awards, because they're a very important consideration when we think about setting our fares. The other thing that we're going to talk about, which is also related to fares, is how to handle non-payment at the fare box. Because we do have a policy or a expectation that everybody pays, but we have to balance that with safety. We have to balance that with not disrupting other people's rides. And so I'm going to do a special video that's going to just focus on that so that you all can have a better idea of what our expectations are in those situations. And I'll let you know in advance, from my perspective, the most important thing is your safety. And so I don't want any of you to ever be putting you or your other or your riders at risk trying to collect $1 or a $2 fare. But we'll dive into that much deeper. Thank you. I hope nothing surprising happens on all of your runs. And thank you for rolling with GMT.